The goal is really to set yourself up in a way that you're not in stress and lack with your finances, to really feel abundant and empowered by it.
What is my energy worth? Because ultimately money is energy, and how do I take that back for myself?
Step one of any of this is you really have to figure out what your greatest value is. From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. Part of our manifestation process entails expanding past your limiting subconscious beliefs. Therefore, by tuning into this podcast with interviews from experts, thought leaders, spiritual teachers, scientists, and those with neural manifestation success stories, you're starting the process of expanding your subconscious in order to see to believe that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, the process begins.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Expanded Podcast. Jessica here. As I'm sure many of you know, we are facing a time of increases in prices. The market's not doing great. Inflation's getting higher. Even simple things from the eggs at the grocery store more expensive to gas at the pump is the highest it's almost ever been. And so I think the impact of those financial shifts is a really good opportunity to take a peek at our money and see ways that we maybe have been avoiding, not looking at, maybe even being too frugal or being stuck in lack mentality. So it's kind of this cool opportunity to, wow, okay, things, I really have to look at my money because it's shifting and it's shifting in front of me in like a rapid pace. And how can I use that shifting point in the society and in the world right now to double down on what my authenticity is within money and finance and abundance, and start to sort of lay the groundwork for setting up a financially abundant life. Abundance looks very different to everyone. Wealth looks different to everyone. Being rich looks different to everyone. And so, at TBM, we're always talking about our authentic selves. So really empowering ourselves to figure out what authentically financially looks good to us, knowing that we can manifest at any time, even if we're in a recession or a bad time economically. So this episode is a two-parter. We're going to have Grace and Lacy on, and we're really going to break down what does an authentic money code look like? What does it look like when you're out of alignment with it and not spending in accordance with it? What does a lack mentality look like? And then we start to look at what steps can we take to pave the way to financial freedom and financial success? And what are very actionable tips that we can do to start doing that? We talk a lot about Ramit Sethi's book and his work, which is fantastic, and we'll link all of the resources in the show notes. Just a disclaimer, this is not professional financial advice. It is for entertainment purposes only, so make sure to do your own research when it comes to this stuff. And I go into a little longer disclaimer in the episode, but just want to put that out there. And then Lacy really breaks down how she set herself up from being completely broke, having no money, needing to rely on her mom for finances at 30, to running a successful business, how she set up her savings, how she set up her investing, and all of the nitty gritty in that. So the first half of the episode is very energetic space manifestation. And the second half, which will air in a couple weeks, will be the deep dive into how Lacy has found financial success through different investing portals and tips. And I think the real key here with any of these money episodes, money can feel like a really triggering piece because it can feel like our security, our baseline, it impacts our home, the way we live, what we can spend money on, the food we buy, how we interact with our loved ones, how we can go visit our loved ones, what our job is and what the money is we're getting from our job. So there is definitely a security piece when it comes to money. And our goal in sharing any of this insight, even for entertainment purposes, is to expand you to know that it is totally possible, no matter what state you are at financially right now, to be able to have a financially free and successful life, even if it feels so impossible. It's the same process of manifestation. It's expanding. And this is going to be a majorly expanding episode for people to get an inside scoop of what it looks like to be an investor and to be investing. These episodes will be so expansive into understanding how to set up your finances, how to look at them, and even what Roth IRA, investing, any of that looks like. Massive expansion. And then continue to find expanders in your real life. Then unblocking. What are those core beliefs that you've had around money? We have a great unblocked money workshop that deals with this, but then you can also take whatever your core wounding is or what your inner child witnessed around money and spending through the unblocking challenge, which is still available in the pathway right now. You can take it through any of our deep imaginings to really work out some of what you didn't see, what you didn't witness, and maybe money was used sort of as like a punishment to withhold. So it may be very triggering. Start to heal some of those inner child wounds so you can just see money as energy and as a tool and as a resource. And then the last part is taking that aligned action and passing tests. And so we want to empower you to take even the smallest action after listening to these episodes as a step towards creating your financially free and magnetic lives. I hope you guys get a lot out of this episode. Feel free to refer back to it. I'm sure you're going to need a notebook at some point listening to this. I know I did. And be sure to check out the show notes because there's going to be tons of links and resources in there as well.
All right, on to the episode.
So we wanted to do a how-to today that really covers the 101 of sort of how to set up your finances, investing, looking at abundance from various different lenses, looking at lack mentality from various different lenses. And it's so interesting because we wound up finding within the team, and we have a really fun round table today with Grace and Lacy, but we're all kind of at different financial points and come at it from different points. And so it's really interesting to hear the base layers of how to set up finances for success, and then also look at what does abundance mean? How do we define that? How are we spending our money? And really dive into all this stuff. And selfishly, I've been wanting to pick Lacy's brain on investing and the 101s of finances for so long. So this is just such a manifestation come through.
I am so excited. This lights me up. I love talking about it. I love empowering all of my friends. Every time I'm looking at a friend or anybody I know, even you guys on the team, I'm just like, I want everybody to know this and to do this. And it's not that it's easy, but it is. It just takes patience. It takes patience, and it takes having a very strong trust muscle. It's so fun, this conversation. And I would love nothing more than everyone in our community to hit their personal goals.
Yes. And I think that's the big key here, right? We're not saying to hit a certain threshold in income. It's going to be, if you do the work, you have your own authentic version of what, Ramit talks about this, but what a rich life looks like. And we've had Ramit Sethi on previous episodes that we'll link as well. And a lot of the intro work and setting up your finances, I actually learned a lot from his book. But the goal is really to set yourself up in a way that you're not in stress and lack with your finances, to really feel abundant and empowered by it. And just quick disclaimer, we're not financial experts or analysts. We're certainly not your financial expert or analyst. So this is not professional financial advice. It's for entertainment purposes only. Always do your own research and consult your own expert when it comes to your finances, because every case is different.
Couldn't agree more. This is why we start with figuring out your personal money authentic code in our money workshop, because I think step one of any of this is you really, really have to figure out what your greatest value is, your greatest desire. I'll get into all of that soon, but I just want to say, when we as a company, as To Be Magnetic, are, inspiring people to manifest financially and unblocked money, and basically any other workshop I think is very much tied to that. It is so important to really, really look at what you're programming versus what your actual authentic self, your authentic soul desires in this life versus what you're seeing or what you think you're supposed to have or what society has shown you, what your parents have pressured you, culturally, what you've been pressured. None of that is going to materialize very quickly for you rather than hacking what is my authentic code, what is my value system. Oh, cool. Let's start working with that. And the universe is like, I'm down. I want to support that. I want to help that.
Why don't we start off there too? What are your guys' authentic money codes?
Yeah, I can start with mine. So, one of the big reasons we got to recording this podcast is because a couple weeks ago, I was really thinking through my financial situations and my own sort of self-imposed financial glass ceiling around what I feel capable of earning. And I'm somebody that has, a skill set that I've been trading for cash. So if I think about what is the bandwidth that I can contribute to make back a certain amount of money, that feels like pretty capped for me. I don't think that I could perform $1 million worth of services, right? So I chatted Lacy about that and I was like, what do you make of this whole concept of what I feel my financial glass ceiling to be and what others might be? And she shot back with like an awesome voice note about how I should be investing and all these cool opportunities that I should take to make my money work for me. That doesn't necessarily mean that I have to provide a service all the time. And in that, I sort of outed my own money shadow around, like I want to do all those things. I've listened to the Remade episode. I've read the book. I know what the system is. I've had the system set up before, but I'm just not following through. Like I keep setting up the system and then draining my bank account, or I'm like living the big life in LA, but then I end up living paycheck to paycheck and I had some credit card debt. And so she really posed to me like, what is the ego want behind the, let's say, $1 million? That's an arbitrary number, but why is it that I want to get to a certain point of financial freedom? And I really took some time and sat with that. And I think that brings us back to the financial money code, because what I realized is I actually grew up with an abundance mindset, and I really have an abundance mindset. I know that money's going to continue to come. I trust myself in knowing that if the rug was pulled out from under me, there's not a scenario where I wouldn't be able to make money because I feel like I have skills to make money. But I sort of just throw my money away. In a way, I'm kind of throwing my energy away, or I'm not thinking through how I'm spending. I'll just willy-nilly say yes to this and yes to that. And then I end up getting drained in a really unintentional way. So coming back to my authentic money code, anchoring into what those are for me is going to be really pivotal and helping me make smarter financial choices. So I just put mine together and I went through all the questions and unblocked money and really thought through what that means for me. And the 4 pillars that I came up with were freedom, empowerment, and autonomy, savvy/growth, and optimization/simplifying. So these are kind of like all abstract ones, but for me, it was less luxury or lifestyle. And it was more like, I want the freedom to spend my days however I want. I want empowerment and autonomy to not rely on a person, a job, or a skill for money. I don't want to have to like go on an amazing trip and then come back and tread water to make my money back again. I want to have some sort of automated system set up where I always feel a baseline level of security. And then I'm really entrepreneurial. I love to like learn new things and hack it and be savvy. And I can get into all these financial topics. It's just that I don't stick with it or follow through. But I want to learn how to make my money work for me, because that's just something that lights me up and is exciting. But I've been sort of like ignoring it because I felt this shame around not already having the system in place. And then the last one was really just like optimizing and simplifying my finances, my life, and everything. Because one of the things I ran into on the Money Authentic Code is, where do I spend the most money? It's when like I have to go on a vacation last minute and I buy 100 outfits, or like I don't plan ahead and I'm on the go and I have to buy all new toiletries. And then another big one for me was I was spending a ton of money on rent. So that's sort of how I came to my 4 pillars.
I want to say
You're just an Aries with money. We got to tap into your Virgo moon. You know what I'm saying here? And I also want to say that you were the one who actually introduced me to Ramit at a roundtable team brainstorm years ago now.
Yes.
I was already investing at that point and had already like heavily done a lot of different investing. I've been really like reading and researching since I was actually 19. But I want to say that like, so you've known of the system for so long. And then the third thing that I really wanted to mention was, or I'll have you elaborate more on before I get into mine, your mom, Mel, we always get back to Mel. Mel is the wise woman who just knows all of the great shit. But she told you a really valuable piece of information that I've gone on to tell to many people. I tell it to Kellen. I've told it to many people. And she had always told you to have one skill. I'll let you elaborate on that.
Yeah. So my mom she's a financial advisor, which is kind of the irony in all of this because I grew up with like a very influential financial background. She's the kind of person who, when I was born, she put $500 in a bond. And then by the time I went to college, it was worth like $20,000. She was always getting our finances set up the right way and managed my dad's finances. So I really had that real masculine energy on my mom's side around money in a cool way. And she was also always making me code my expenses in QuickBooks when I was in high school and all that kind of stuff. So I have that sort of base knowledge on finances from her. And then the other thing she always said is always have a skill to fall back on. And so hers was coaching tennis. And she told me this my whole life. She would always have coaching gigs at the Y or at my high school. Even if we didn't need the money, she just sort of kept that going. So she had that energy and momentum for herself. And then actually when my parents got divorced, my mom was a little bit screwed over, but she had tennis. She like took on a full-time job at the Y. She started coaching at school and she sort of had this little career for herself just based on that skill. So that's a really good tip for anybody. Mine would be graphic design. I went to school for graphic design. I know if the world falls apart, I could still make a business card or a website. It's not exactly what I want to spend my time on now, but I have that confidence to fall back on. Not everything can be pulled out from under me because I'll always have something that I can provide to make money back.
Yeah, I think that's such a good, really good piece of knowledge to know because I think so many people, even if they don't know what they want to do, or say like an MG or something, you know, where interest, it varies. I have manifestation. If To Be Magnetic fell apart tomorrow, I've invested well enough that it wouldn't actually affect my life in any way, shape, or form. However, if let's say all of my investments or something, though they're really well secured, went away, I could just start seeing clients again. That's my thing. So I just think even if it's not, I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. I think after To Be Magnetic, I want to start literally like an animal sanctuary or like a dog rescue, you know, but it's my thing that I've honed in. I've done it enough. I'm a pro at it. I could very much see clients and see them through, et cetera. And so I just think that's such a great piece of advice that everybody should have one skill set that they really, really perfect or feel so confident in that they can always fall back on that, even if it's not their dream or their whatever. And Kevin, who is cutting our episode, I like to think of him. Kevin is wonderfully talented musically and has gone on to sell just within this last year that I even know about music for commercials and whatnot. But he has the skill set of editing and he could always do that no matter what. Even though that's not his dream, he can always have that to fall back on. So I just think that's a wonderful piece of information while somebody's on their journey to financial freedom.
Totally. And it doesn't have to be a highly technical skill either. Like I know the ones we referenced, editing, teaching manifestation, graphic design. It could be teaching yoga. It could be like my mom's teaching tennis. It doesn't have to be something you need to go to school for.
I'm having like a aha moment as you guys are talking about this because I kind of come from more lack mentality and things and have been working and pulling that apart further and further. And one thing is I put a lot of pressure on myself of like, what if the rug gets pulled out from under me? would I be able to do the dream, the XYZ, whatever? But then when I think back to that skill set, I'm like, oh, I'm a masterful producer. That's what I went to school for. That's what I was doing in film and television for years, editing, producing, all of that. And it's like, okay, I always thought that wouldn't be another option because it's not the dream position, but it does give you a little bit of a baseline security that like, okay, if the rug was pulled out, I have this to go back to. I'm good at it. I don't have to think, it's on autopilot. And then you can go and manifest that dream thing afterwards. So it almost like gives you an element of security when you're getting out of lack mentality too.
Yeah. And I think what I know to be true at this point when it comes to money and manifestation, it's all energy and it's all theory, just like every other piece of manifestation. So the one thing that grants everybody when they have that under their belt, like you're saying, Jessica, is it's the ultimate trust muscle. If you have that, you can always hustle that in a pinch when needed to hold you over, get you out of, be your fuck you, whatever. So I just think that's just a really, really powerful thing that we should probably ask Mel if we can put it inside of our workshop.
Totally. She would be honored.
She would be so honored, I bet. So there's that piece. And then I will get into a little bit of, explaining my authentic code. Is actually not 4, it's 2, because when I did it, everything just came back down to these 2. Even when I had 2 others, this was really the root of them. So to give you background on me, I come from, 2 very young parents who were not financially stable or set up when they had me. So in those really formative years of 1 to 3, there was a lot of instability financially. I remember my mom being like, don't tell them I'm writing a hot check. We don't have money to pay for this. Coming home one day being like, I want to ride my bike. And my mom being like, it was in storage. I couldn't pay the storage bill. All of your toys are gone. So it's like tremendous lack mentality of just rolling along with 18-year-old parents until they did eventually both become financially secure and stable. So extreme, extreme lack mentality. And I do have to say that both of you are far ahead of where I was at both of your ages. I mean,
wow.
Far ahead of where I was. So I just want that to be really expansive for people. At 30.5, when I was 30 and a half, I was newly single from somebody I thought I would probably marry and have kids with. I lost all of my clients at that holiday season because the universe was drying up. I was at that time personal chefing and running my holistic blog that I was making very, very little money off of. And right when I broke up, the biggest test the universe gave me, as it was telling me you have to put manifestation into the world, was it dried up every one of my resources. It was the very first time I ever had to call my mom and use her credit cards to live and survive in my life. And I was living in a 300 square foot apartment. Like, you guys are so far ahead of where I was at 30. And then, of course, when I did put out manifestation, everything started to boom from there. But I think that's a really good perspective for a lot of people who are probably listening to this and potentially even younger than I was at that point, to go, okay, I'm doing fine. Like, I'm doing okay. I also want to say my background, I was always raised around people with wealth, meaning that I went to the school that all of the wealthy kids went to school at because we faked my aunt's address, and I would go to the school my cousins went to, even though we didn't live in that district. So everybody at that point, their parents were all like lawyers and doctors and the richest people within my hometown. So I have always watched what rich people do. And I've always taken note because for me, I think growing up with young parents and not a lot of stability, I knew I didn't want what that looked like. I wanted what the wealthy families look like because that just seemed really stable. So it wouldn't surprise you that my money authentic code, because I'm so Aquarius, is freedom. Meaning I want to be able, like you, Grace, I want to be able to do what I want, when I want, how I want, anytime I want. I don't want anything, any barriers around that. And that isn't in a way of like, I want to be able to just go here and do that. It doesn't come down to that. It means I want to be my little projector self, that if I have to hide in a hobbit hole for a month and not see anybody and do the weird things that I do, being super isolated, I can. And so that's where that comes from. That's number 1. And number 2 for me is security. Because I come from so much instability, not only financially, but my parents' boyfriends and girlfriends and the wives leaving and the whatever, and then going to 4 different households, sometimes in 1 week. to me, stability and security means everything. So those are my two money code values, period. And so I think the biggest, most important thing that people can figure out for themselves, like I said at the top of the episode, is what is yours? There's a lot of shit that you're being fed on Instagram of what your life should look like. You've been fed culturally, you've been fed societally. None of that matters. It's what is yours. And just like when I got the voice note from Grace, kind of in a fluster like 2 weeks ago, being like, talking about this really great theory that we could introduce to our work about like baseline worth, but being like, I want to make $2 million or $1 million. And me being like, but why? What's underneath that? Awesome. You're on the road to, you're going to, that's not going to be a problem in your life. I totally see that all coming. But what's underneath that? Why? And so I think that's a huge, huge key piece for people. And we'll get into this more. But when, let's say we were manifesting Topanga, it was never like, I want the house and the things. It was like, I need nature. I need trees. I want an old cabin that feels like a mix between my grandparents' ranch house and their coast house. At the root of everything that we teach in this work, when you're calling in something on your list, you have to get down to the core want and why. That's the only thing the universe is here to help you with. It doesn't give a shit about all the egoic stuff that you're trying to prove to your parents to be loved or to your high school classmates or the whatevers and the whatevers. That doesn't matter. And most often than not, if you do manifest those things, they're going to end up in a beautiful test or a rock bottom. The universe cares about what your authentic, whole, worthy self came onto this planet to have and need to support its purpose. Everything that I manifest into my life, especially easy, and the universe helps me with, it's to further my purpose of why I'm here, why the universe has unfolded the fact that I'm on this planet. So I think that is just the biggest takeaway from this episode. You need to figure out your authentic money code and why. What is your value system? Because from there, you can start to figure out how to become financially free.
Yeah, I love that. And for me, it was super subtle. I sort of had some ego stuff in my life, but I didn't consciously know that I wanted it. It wasn't like, oh, I need to have the nice car so that I can impress my friends or like stick to those people in high school who made fun of me. But I was just sort of doing those things because I could afford them, but like afford them by means of not having any leftover money or not actually making progress towards my financial goals. So I think I was just on autopilot, doing all the things I could afford to do without intentionality or plan. So zooming back, doing the authentic money code, getting strategic about those things, I wouldn't have made those decisions if I had come from it with a place of intention rather than just like autopilot, doing the things that like are subconscious and make you think you need to have the car, have the thing, even if it's not a core want.
So my authentic money code comes down to kind of those same security things. So home, having a space where I can uniquely be myself and purchase the things to decor it, to purchase a home, all of those things. Freedom, do what I want, when I want, get the groceries I want without being like, oh no, eggs are $7 now. I can't get them, but like they're the natural eggs I love and make me feel good. So I want to be able to buy them without thinking. Self-care things. If I need to like book a massage because my body's feeling really tight, I want to be able to book it without thinking twice. And then the other piece was also security to pursue growth. And yes, security, but I like the idea of, okay, I have a stable amount always coming in. So kind of what you were saying, Grace, like you never want to be like, oh, I get this freedom and then I have to come back and hustle for it. I don't want to feel like I have to hustle for the next, range or the next piece or the next piece. It's like, I want to have a baseline security of like, okay, all my money is coming in. I have my budgets. I know where everything's going. I'm building investments on the side. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Now I can think about big, high level things. And I really think of Alex Cooper from Call Her Daddy as an expander for this because she signed this massive, and I don't want necessarily the numbers that she got on this, but it's the same energetics. She got a massive deal from Spotify. She gets, I think it's a large chunk every 3 years or once a year for every 3 years. So her main goal then and her main job is, okay, I know this massive thing is is coming in. I don't have to fight for it or work hard to prove myself year after year. I know it's coming in for 3 years. Now I can just make the coolest, dopest, most expansive podcast ever. And I like that energy of, I don't need to hustle for my next layer. It's I know all of this is coming in, and then I can pursue big level growth ideas and put time and effort into those things.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code, EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode.
Let's actually dive into that a little bit more too, because I think that's one thing when we think about this work, like Grace, you're very much in an abundance mindset. Okay, I'll spend money on this thing, or I'll give this thing away to this person for free, or I'll buy this, or I'll, take that trip or whatever, knowing that money will still come in. But I kind of want to break down at what point, if you're spending money, let's say you don't have, how is that also blocking manifestations, not being authentic? Because I think, we have this checklist of lack mentality, right? So it's how to spot if you are not in your worth financially, because it doesn't always come in the form of lack. So are you avoiding looking at your finances completely? Are you spending beyond your means? Are you frugal with money and afraid to spend it? Are you afraid the rug will be pulled out from under you financially if you pursue more or spend more? Are you dependent on others for financial support while calling in financial independence yourself? Do the people who surround you struggle with money or complain about money often? Do the people around you spend beyond their means? Or are they in massive debt they feel unable to get out of? Do you feel the need to spend more to keep up with anyone around you, but truly can't afford it? Do you not spend any money outside of your necessities, and when you do, you feel intense guilt or fear? Do you feel judgmental of other spending habits? Are unexpected bills or expenses very triggering to you? And do you feel scared you'll never have enough money or resources? And are you spending your purchases in alignment with your authentic money code? So are some of your biggest purchases kind of netted under those authentic code pillars? If it's drastically different, like you're spending a ton of money on something you don't even have is even close to your authentic money code, that might be a point to look at and see why and how you're spending in that category. So that's just a good checklist to see there. But then on the other side of the coin, if you're spending beyond your means or you're avoiding your finances, you're not even looking at it, but you're just like, oh no, things will come in. And like, yes, maybe things will come in, but the avoidance is also a bit of low self-worth behavior around money. So Lacy, can you kind of break that down a bit where we're maybe not in full self-worth, whether it is the lack mindset or we're in avoidance mindset, maybe could we call it?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that really just comes down to self-worth stuff. It's the same thing as the person who's like, oh, I'm not going to start dating yet. I'm getting ready to when I lose weight or when I do X, Y, and Z. It's the exact same thing. It just means you don't feel in your worth, that you deserve what you want. So if you fall on the spectrum of being so frugal that you won't ever do anything for yourself, it really just comes down to anything else, like unblocking. Use that in this challenge that we're wrapping up. You still have access to it. Go take that as your core wound through this wonderful challenge, especially through the unblocked exercise. But I think a better way to look at this from, like, let's say through a financial lens. And this is something we talked about a lot. Grace and I were at lunch with another friend last Friday. Well, I want to say one thing that I think is so incredibly important, that I think people should really take this away. If you do find, and I think this will be the case for many, many people, especially as we start to shift into what's, people call the Aquarian age. I think a lot of people's authentic money code is going to be financial freedom. I think a lot of people desire that, and it looks very different for people. That's where your secondary or third or fourth piece of that code will tell you what that looks like for you. But once you figure out, okay, financial freedom is really my thing. And Remy talks a lot about this in his book. Someone's retiring at 30 looks very different than another person's retiring at 30. One person might just want that van or camping life, that's retirement to them, that they live on like a really specific budget, and that they don't have to have a job, or they can intermittent many years between jobs. Whereas another person's 30 retirement may be, 5 million in the bank or whatever. So getting very clear about what yours looks like. Then I would say, if any form of financial freedom is in your code and is something you desire, please write this down. You are only working at jobs to acquire investments. I don't care how much money you make. Your goal is not to get wrapped up in the rat race. So a lot of people look at the rat race. They're like, okay, I'm going to work at this, and then I'm going to hop to this job for more money, and I'm going to ask for this for more money. And they look at that as their means to getting the big things that they want in their life. Yes, of course, do that. However, you need to get a financial mindset in place way before you start doing that, because your only means to truly, truly having financial freedom is if you secure investments that pay passive income. Mm-hmm. You have to have passive income if you really want to have financial freedom. And in this episode, we'll talk about this, but anybody can start to build, passive income. You really, truly can. So you are working at a job to acquire investments that are then going to lead to passive income. If you're working at a job and you're not acquiring investments, you're just blowing time. Done. Like, just done. So any job you're doing, may it be freelance, may it be your own business, may it be for a company, even if it's your dream job and your dream career, if you are not securing investments along the way that are going to contribute to passive income, you are not going to have a wealthy lifestyle. And when I say wealthy, it just means freedom. One's wealthy looks very different than another's, just like the example I gave of people who want to retire at 30, let's say. So that just has to be something that people have to shift their mindset to. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's the way that I'd like to answer that question through the lens of finance a little bit more, is that you're really, really focused on the things that you want to buy in your life. And we'll talk about this more. Your passive income is paying for it. If it's the fancy car, if it's the nice clothes, if it's the whatever, your passive income's paying for it. And we'll talk about building that soon.
I think that's such an important thing. You hear in a lot of the entrepreneurial Instagram pages or whatever, they talk about how you cannot be rich being someone else's employee. And so the thing is that I love the piece that you said, which is, if you are taking your salary and investing, it's not that everyone has to be an entrepreneur and own their own business to do whatever. It's, okay, maybe you can't get quote unquote rich with just a salary alone because, inflation and expenses and all of those things. But it's taking that salary and divvying it up in a certain way where you can invest and have that side income portal. And that's how you can start to grow your own financial wealth. And that is where you have the freedom. So you're not dependent upon the salary to bring your full financial freedom.
Absolutely. And I love this example because, again, I've always watched what wealthy people do, and I've always been reading finance books since I was 19. The very first one that was handed to me was my boyfriend's dad in high school, who had followed this model and was in a very secure position after having been like hugely in debt and had to file bankruptcy. And it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I love Robert. I've been asking to get him on the podcast forever.
We're trying, Robert, if you're out there.
Come on this podcast.
Come on.
We are ready to chat. It was the first book that I read. It made utter and total sense to me. I had grown up in a family, like once my mom was secure, I watched her and her partner and her partner's dad. They were really into flipping homes, buying homes, etc. So it was expanded that that's possible. They weren't fancy houses or anything. They were looked at as investments. So to me, real estate's always made sense. And the whole formula that he taught in that book is that there's a difference between rich and poor. And what that looks like is that when you're buying things, you're not buying them to be like the fancy, cool thing. You're buying it to then take the equity out and buy something else and keep building and building until all of your passive income is contributing to everything you want in your life. And so I was really fortunate enough that my best friend of many years, Lacrana, if you're out there and listening, he and his brother had done just that. And by the time he was in his 30s, they owned 10 fourplex apartment complexes in Los Angeles and were completely like they could retire at that point if they had wanted to. In the sense that they had passive income paying for their entire lifestyle. But here's a really good example of what you just talked about that was a fantastic expander. The main clients that I private chef for back when I was doing that at my brokest moment, he was the head of a studio, the biggest studio in Los Angeles. And was he relying on just his income from that studio to build his rich life? He absolutely was not. But he was becoming very rich using that income. And this is why I say you absolutely can, no matter who your employer is, you can begin to build your portfolio at 29. Before he was a studio head, at that point, I think he was an assistant. He took the little amounts of income that he was making and he bought his first investment property. And then for the next 5 years, he continued to take the equity and flip into a bigger until at the time that I was cooking for them, it was like one of the most gorgeous mansions in Hancock Park.
I knew it was large. I don't know why.
Yes.
My gut was like, it's large.
Oh my God.
Sure.
Like an old traditional Tudor. I mean, it was bananas. And while they were living in that, he and his husband, they were already preparing to flip. Oh my God, this like next historic home that they were going to work on in Los Angeles was crazy. And I watched that. And his whole life, the flow that he had going for them, was all being paid through his passive income. Like, they were affording me as their private chef, not from his salary at the studio. It was from passive income. But that's a great expander to your point. And when he started that process, he was still assisting at a studio. So you absolutely, absolutely can. And so the moment that he would be retiring, because studio heads only truly they differ, but it's such a stressful position that a lot of them that I've known last about 5 years as a head, 5 to 10. And then they just they burn out entirely. He, at that point, he can retire. He has full blown passive income taking care of his life.
Okay, so 2 questions in here. One, and this is one thing that Grace mentioned, was like, okay, great. Everyone's hearing that we need to have passive income, we need to have investments. But then if you have someone who's living paycheck to paycheck and they literally do not have the money in their paycheck to provide for their basic needs and everything feels like a stretch, what is the first place you would tell someone to start looking at even having money to put aside for these outside investments?
So different financial advisors have different suggestions for this. And I'll take myself, for example, in the sense that the moment that I launched Manifestation, I had done so much research on finance. I have a Capricorn moon. And again, like freedom and security, I love David Bach. I loved his series so that I would really know what to do, that if I had money one day, this is what I'll do with it. Same with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I knew that for me, real estate will always be a vessel. So basically, taking myself as an example, when it came to me realizing acting's not the thing for me, okay, I'm going to have to figure my life out, because I had literally not gone to college and dedicated my entire life to becoming an actress. At 27, I went, I'm going to go and take this job for 1 year of being a preschool teacher, which ended up being like the most toxic, thing that the universe sent at me, because it's like, you have a purpose and you're not doing it. But I took that job in order to have enough income to pay off my debt and follow the steps we'll talk about. With that being said, when you're in a paycheck to paycheck situation, it's really about getting the bridge job or the job that you manifest if you're expanded and unblocked enough for it, that's going to allow you to start to begin to acquire investments. So that's number one. Number two, the best piece of advice I received from an Australian girl that worked at this VFX company with me when I was 20 years old is she said, always live cheap. Other people in the finance world are like, build a budget, cut out these things here, do this. Ramit's whole thing is the money dial. So it's like the things you really love, turn the dial up on that, turn the dial down on everything else. Let's say you love clothes, have a budget for what you're going to spend on clothes, but don't buy a new computer for 7 years because that's not something you care about or whatever your money dial is. My best piece of advice is live as cheap as possible and buy as many investments as possible so that when you do have passive income, you can start to use the $300 a month you're making off of your stocks to pay for your fancy car. That's how you start to do it. So for me, living cheap, finding the best rent deal, making the sacrifice of having a roommate if I have to, whatever. I kept the same Toyota Yaris for 10 years until one of my investments could pay for my first little Audi that was just the tiny, smallest Audi I could buy. So that's my big way that I did it. Use the bridge job, manifest the thing you want, live cheap, and start to buy your investments. However, I think, Grace, you also highlight a very, very cool, within literally 2 weeks, Aries style answer to what this can look like for somebody in your position of how to get really creative about living beneath your means, sacrificing a little bit in order to build your investments.
Yeah. So like I said, I've always had this finance knowledge. So there's a bit of shame on my end that I haven't been able to master the system. So I had a little bit of that avoidance. I would feel stressed, but I wouldn't know about why. And then I'd finally sit down to look at my finances and come up with a plan. And then I'd feel better again. But I wasn't really making any progress towards paying off credit card debt or saving money because I was spending so much money on things like rent and car and just baseline expenses. I wasn't living under my means. I was living at just about what I could spend to use up every single shred of money I made in a month. So when I was chatting back and forth with Lacy about, that whole concept, investing and self-worth and all that kind of stuff, it just sort of came to me that the one ego thing that I had that I could get rid of right away to pay off my credit card debt and to get myself to zero so that I could actually set up my system and start over was my car. So at the beginning of the year, I decided to buy a new car that was a bigger car. And at the time, it seemed like a smart idea. I went in and I really negotiated and I felt good about the whole transaction. But the thing is, I don't really care about luxury cars. It was a BMW. I also don't even drive that much. And now with inflation and gas prices $7 a gallon, I'm spending so much money a month on gas because it only gets $25 a gallon. So I just got the hit, get rid of the car. I looked it up. It's retailing for more than I bought it for. And then literally the next day I went in back to the dealer, got a quote from somebody privately. And then I went to CarMax and CarMax offered me $1,000 more than I bought it for. So I was able to give my car in right there, get the check from CarMax. They paid off what I owed on the car. I walked away with a chunk of money. And with that chunk of money, I paid off all my credit cards and I started completely at zero. And then the manifestation continued because I happened to be house sitting that week. The people I was house sitting for already had a car. And then I had plans to go home for the summer, so I wouldn't need a car. And then I got really into this whole game of how do I downsize? So the next thing that I could get rid of is my apartment. I have an amazing place in Topanga. You might have even listened to the episode of me manifesting it, and it's incredible. But the one thing that I can do is just have a cheaper rent, and I could save $1,000 a month by doing that. So all of this is also maybe a hard blow to the ego of I had the rich life, quote unquote, set up, but now I have to give it all away.
Wait, I want to interject there because, again, I want everybody to realize I don't give a shit if you're a studio head making $3 million a year, but you're literally not investing any of it. You're just having bad money habits. You're not living a rich life. So in fact, that's like the real mind switch that has to happen, which is so big. In fact, now, Grace, you're flipping it to start to live a rich life because you're going to start acquiring investments. But go ahead.
Right. So it's like I had the facade set up. On the outside, it looked like I had gotten there, but I hadn't actually. So now it's like a fun game to me. After I sold my car, money just started flowing in little ways. Like I got a $25 check from my grandma. Someone Venmoed me something from a couple years ago. Someone gave me a gift card to the grocery store so I could eat for free. People started taking me out to dinner. I sold clothes at Crossroads. I sold a luxury handbag online. I just got really into what are all the different ways that I could downsize to just get the money portals flowing. And so this was all in the last 2 weeks. I've had all this flow. And with that, I've also, had to have a lot of boundary setting conversations, getting rid of any work that I wasn't being fairly compensated for, setting boundaries with different guys that I had outstanding relationships with. And it was all this energy around what is my energy worth? Because ultimately money is energy. And how do I take that back for myself? I've been giving it away for free, whether it's to friends or to lovers or as a job, whatever. And I'm now in this energy of taking it back for myself and figuring out how to use it in a smarter way, which is ultimately, empowering me to live a more rich life. And one thing I haven't even shared with you guys yet is that I had been thinking about how do I get rid of the place in Topanga? It's just so expensive. Could I be nomadic for a couple of months and then move into something cheaper? And I was really laying in bed agonizing about it. And yesterday someone texted me and I just had the ping to ask them hey, do you want my place in Topanga? And they were like, yes. So,
wow.
So now I might have somebody who's able to take it over. So I'm very much in the energy of blowing everything up so that I can start from zero and actually build that system and having to put whatever ego, attachment, facade of rich life aside and be okay, can I just make this a fun game? I'm not on the streets or something. I do have enough to operate if I operate in a way that's smarter. So it's actually more in my power to get the cheaper apartment, the cheaper car, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it like I said earlier, it's just a sacrifice for a very little while you begin to build. And what I really like about your example and your story, Grace wasn't in some financial hardship or hard rock place. She has what a lot in LA would consider that's a great, income yearly or whatever. So really what you did was so powerful because you went, okay, it's so unbelievably magnetic. You were okay, this stuff isn't what defines me. In fact, I've just been really unconscious about a lot of this stuff. And I'm going to now become really intentional and build my portfolio and my wealth. And the universe is yep, no problem. Gotcha. Been waiting for this. Happy to help. So it just highlights many different people, myself, Jessica, what you guys have been doing, you and Daniel, which is so brilliant. Look at how quickly you did that, Grace. It just shows a lot of different savvy and smart ways to start to then figure out a way to have a little bit extra to get a system in place and build your portfolio. I still live tremendously beneath what one who didn't have a lot of financial savvy would be living. It's crazy. Even when I was sacrificing, I always manifested cool shit. Always. It wasn't up until I would say 3 years ago that I was still thrifting regularly to find the jean, the hat, the thing, the stuff I was looking for. That's a big piece. I think also beginning to manifest a lot. You had a great example of Daniel the other day. I lived my life like that for a very, very long time, if you want to share that story.
So he also has sort of this mentality where he's seeing anytime that he feels like he has to curb himself, financially or not buy the thing, because he errs on the side of living within his means for sure. But then when it's like time to splurge, he's like, well, isn't it lack if I don't reward myself, if I have the money to do so? And I was like, no, you can just manifest it. So we were at a vintage shop. It was like a very expensive vintage shop. He found like amazing pieces that he really, really liked. And he's like, it would make me feel confident and abundant to have these pieces. I was like, okay, great. Now you know the style, take a picture, what do you like most about it? And then manifest it. And then going to a vintage shop literally down the street, it was a $200 item that was almost $14 at another vintage shop right away, just because he was like, okay, I know I can manifest this now. So just seeing those little ways where it's like, maybe you do have the means to pay for it and maybe your investments can pay for it, but like, can you just also manifest it if it's something you really enjoy and you can get the essence of that item?
100%.
I hope you guys enjoyed part 1 of this episode. We'll have part 2 air in a couple of weeks. And I just wanted to give some actionable, practical tips of where to go next. If you're listening into the episode and you're like, okay, great, a lot of this makes sense, or this applies to me, or I understand that, but what do I do from here? Here is your roadmap. So first you want to check in and see, are you in your worth financially? Here are some check marks to see and start to gauge where you might be at. Are you avoiding looking at finances completely? Are you spending beyond your means? Are you frugal with money, afraid to spend it? Are you afraid the rug will be pulled out from under you financially if you pursue more or spend more? Are you dependent on others for financial support while you're calling in your own financial independence? Do the people who surround you struggle with money or complain about money often? Do the people around you spend beyond their means, or are they in massive debt and feel they are unable to get out of it? Do you feel the need to spend more to keep up with the people around you, but you can't afford it at the moment? Do you not spend any money outside of your necessities, and when you do, you feel intense guilt or fear? Do you feel judgmental of other spending habits? Are unexpected bills or expenses very triggering to you? Do you feel scared you'll never have enough money or resources? And are you spending your purchases in alignment with your authentic money code? So these are just some of the ways you can start to look at, okay, maybe I'm not quite in my full financial worth, and how can I start to unblock those beliefs and the programming and start to expand and see what is possible for me on the other side. That way you can take aligned action to be connected with whatever financial freedom and financial abundance looks like authentically to you, because again, it does look different for everyone. And so once you are kind of clear on that checklist and maybe some of the things that apply to you, I would then go into our Unblocked Money workshop and do your authentic money code. Get really clear. What are the things when it comes to finances that mean a lot to you, that are not out of ego, that are truly out of a core desire and dream, if you got to the real root and essence of what the feeling attached to that is. The next thing that you'll want to do is take any of the old programming or limiting belief through our Deep Imaginings or in the Unblocked Money course. Now, I would highly suggest taking any root beliefs to our Unblocked DI. That one's going to be super, super helpful. And then if you're finding fear or anxiety around money, our fear, anxiety DI are going to be perfect for that. Then you want to start looking at expanders. So one of the ways that Lacy says that you can become financially free outside of money that's coming in perhaps from a salary is to start looking at investments. And investments can mean a plethora of different things. And in part 2, we'll really go into that a bit more. But when you're looking at investments, if you are someone who maybe doesn't even have $1 to put into investments or savings right now, one way you can start to expand yourself is just to read about them. Find experts who teach on them, find other people who are using investments and setting up some of their funds or retirement or any of those sorts of things, and just start to have those conversations. Start to expand yourself that, oh, when I do have that extra money, then I can start investing, and it is possible for me. You can see to believe that it's possible for you to do as well. Then I would also take inventory of everything that's happening in your life and all of your finances and see where you can trim the fat. Are there any places that you're spending out of ego or spending on things that honestly just don't bring you joy? Can you limit those like Grace did, or maybe shift them around in order to live as modestly as possible in order to start building up some of your either savings, retirement, FU fund, whatever it is. And also look at what bridge jobs can help bring you there, if you're in debt or if you're needing to build up that FU fund. We're going to go more into some of the practical tips in part 2. So hopefully that's helpful and are some really actionable tips of how you can take the insights from this episode into real life and get you starting to think about finances in perhaps a different way. Happy manifesting, everyone.